Webcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, good people. This is Bob McElroy, and welcome to the webinar. I am one of 4 certified trainers at SageU who teach Sage Fixed Assets. And the rest of the team include Paul Lentz, Ann Thornton, and Julie Dowling. And some of the team are here with me, helping me to deliver this webinar today. And Julie is sitting out there in the audience with you. So welcome. This webinar is going to be covering the bulk edit feature. As you can see, the title is Leveraging the Power of the Bulk Edit. Now, as I go through this material, if you have a question you'd like to ask, you can use the icon that looks like a question mark, and enter your question, and some of your questions may be answered by Paul. We'll try to reserve a little time at the end of this webinar to answer questions that were not addressed during the webinar. The lawyers tell me I've got to show you this slide, reminding you that our work is protected. And now let's take a look at our agenda. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the book information fields on some individual asset records. I'm going to show you how you can change your critical field effective with the placed in service date. Also changing it effective with the current through date. We'll look at the implications of these kinds of changes. And then we're going to finish up by making these kind of changes to a group of assets using the bulk edit feature. Now, talking about changing an asset record from its placed in service date, if the asset has not yet been depreciated, it's really not a complicated issue to change a book information field. In fact, let's just do this. Let's show you how easy an operation this really is. Let me open up my Sage program. Okay, so we're now looking at the Sage program. This is the depreciation program. And I am going to go into the detailed view for an asset. In this case, it is a QIP asset. You may recognize that acronym. QIP stands for Qualified Improvement Property. And as you may know from the CARES Act of 2020, which was signed into law by the President on March 27th, the tax treatment for QIP assets has changed. And these changes are retroactive back to 2018. But in this case, we've got an asset that we put into service this year. And so if you take a look at the tax book, for example, you'll see it was put in service in January of this year. And we were depreciating it over a Makers 100 method, no bonus. And it was depreciating over GDS over recovery of 39 years. So if I scroll down to look at the blue depreciation calculation figures, you'll notice it has no depreciation on it. It has not yet been depreciated yet in the tax book. So I want to comply now with the new tax law. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this method here to take the bonus. I'll change it to MA100. I'll hit the tab key. I do get a warning here that tells me, well, you can only take the bonus on assets with a 20-year life or less. And I know that. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now I'm going to change the life to 15 because this fix to the change in the law affecting QIP assets now makes the recovery period 15 years. So I'll change that. I'll hit the tab key. Now I'll go ahead and save my changes. And I'll go back to the asset list view. Let me go back to the PowerPoint slide. And you'll notice that this was a pretty simple change. But what if the asset has already been depreciated? Well, if you make a change to a critical field and the asset has already been depreciated, you're going to see this warning that you see right here. Here's a screenshot of what it's going to look like. And take a look at the language here. This first sentence reminds you that you're making a change to a critical field. And then look at the second sentence. Changing the asset attribute will affect existing depreciation information. In other words, what this is really saying is this depreciation amount that I've calculated for you so far is not a valid number. If you change this critical field in the way that you want to change it, are you sure you want to do this? And then you're going to click yes, I want to do this. And then a dialog window is going to appear. And here's a screenshot of what it might look like. It's going to say, okay, when do you want to make this change effective? Now, if you look carefully, you'll see there are actually 4 dates here on this dialog window. In this particular screenshot, one of them is grayed out. The beginning date is grayed out because I don't have a beginning date on this particular asset. But you have these other choices, and you'll notice that the bullet, the default bullet, lies on the current through date. So the program is expecting me to make this change effective with the last time I depreciated the asset. That would be the current through date. And you know, typically that's what we do. Not always. There are some cases, in fact, we're going to look at a few cases right now where we're going to make it effective from the placed in service date, but often we make it effective from the current through date. So let's take a look at an example of this. Let me go ahead and break away from the PowerPoint. And now I'm going to open up the depreciation program again. And let's take a look at an asset that we put into service, again, a QIP asset that was put into service back in 2018. So here I can see this asset was put into service in January 2018, depreciated like that last one I was showing you, using the depreciation method MF100, no bonus, because at the time this was created, we were not allowed to take the bonus. And also using a recovery of 39, which was the way the law was written at that time in 2018. Now, if I look at the blue depreciation calculation figures, I can see that this asset has already accumulated over $5,000 of depreciation expense through the last time it was depreciated in this book, which was at the end of last year. You see the current through date showing 12/2019 and the current accum of over $5,000. So in order to comply with the law, and you remember I said that this change to the tax law is retroactive back to 2018. To comply with that law, I really need to change the recovery period. And if I want to take the bonus, I don't have to take the bonus, but if I want to, I can change the method here to take the bonus depreciation. So now the law has been changed. I'm qualified to take the bonus on QIP. So I'm going to change it to MA100, and I'll hit the tab key, and notice what happens. I get this warning, just like I showed you on that PowerPoint slide, reminding me that I'm making a change to a critical field, and reminds me that changing this will affect existing depreciation, which really means that $5,000 figure that I showed you is not a valid number if I change this method the way I want to. Or are you sure you want to do this? And I'm going to say yes. And the program comes back, okay, when do you want to make it effective? Now in this example, we only have one viable option. And that's because if I'm going to take the bonus, I have to do it in the first year we put this asset into service. So I'll go ahead and click OK. Reminds me that this only applies, the bonus only applies to assets with a 20-year life or less. I'll click OK, and I'll change the life here to 15, hit the tab key, And now if I scroll down to look at the blue depreciation calculation figures, I'll see that $5,000 figure that I had before is gone. But look at this. The 168 allowance amount equals the acquisition value because I get to write off the entire cost of this asset just because I put it in service and I took the bonus depreciation. I may want to do the same thing here to the AMT book as well. In the interest of time, I'm not going to take the time to do that, but in real life, I probably would. Well, I certainly would in real life. So that's how you can make a change to an asset that is depreciated over GDS. But let's take a look at an asset. Let's say that you created up using ADS. You were depreciating it over the alternative depreciation system, ADS. Let me go back here and to the asset list view and save the changes to that last one. So here I've got an asset, again, a QIP asset. We put into service back in 2018. This one put in service in March. We're depreciating it over the ADS, and so I'm using the AD method. And notice the recovery period is 40 years because in 2018, that was what the law required. The ADS recovery period was 40 years. Again, if I look at the blue depreciation calculation figures, you can see by the end of last year, we've got over $4,000 of accumulated depreciation. Okay, now if I want to change the method on this one, and again, if I want to take the bonus, which I'm now allowed to do on QIP property, I'm going to change this method to AA, which is an ADS method, but gives me the bonus. And so I'll go ahead and change that. And when I hit the tab key, again, I'm going to see the same warning that I showed you earlier. I'm going to click yes. Again, it's going to give me this dialog window. When do you want to make it effective? But if I'm taking the bonus, I really only have one viable option, and that is with the placed in service date. So go ahead and click OK. Again, it reminds me, well, this bonus is only allowed on assets with a 20-year life or less. So I'll go ahead and click OK to acknowledge. And the ADS life now, under the new tax law change, is 20 years. And I'll tab. So now if I scroll down to look at the blue depreciation calculation figures, you'll see that current accum figure that I showed you earlier of $4,000 is now erased. But now I'm capturing the entire amount here as bonus depreciation. I'm getting it a complete write-off of the cost of this asset just because I put it in service. Okay, I'll go ahead and save these changes, and I'll go back to the asset list view. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, let's look at this first polling question. When the critical field is changed on an asset that's already been depreciated and made effective from the placed in service date, will it erase the accumulated depreciation? Yes or no? So Paul, if you'll go ahead and launch the polling question right now, and you'll see a truncated version of this question pop up. When the critical field is changed on an asset already depreciated and made effective from the placed in service date, will it erase the accumulated depreciation? Yes or no? Let me give you a few more seconds here to put in your answer. Paul, you can go ahead and close the polling question now. And you can, let's see here. 100% said yes. Very good. That is the right answer. So yes, if you make that change effective from the place and service date, it will erase the accumulated depreciation. There it is. There's the answer. Everybody got that right. Very good. Now let's look at another example. This is where we're going to change a critical field. It's an asset already depreciated, but we're going to make the change effective from the current through date. And in fact, maybe this has happened to you. You build an asset record based on the information that you have at the time. And then you start depreciating it, and that goes on for some period of time. And each month you're posting those depreciation expense figures to your journal. And then someone sends you an invoice related to that asset. And you get this invoice and you're thinking, wait a minute, where has this been? And who knows? Maybe it was sitting in somebody's inbox. Maybe it got lost in the mail. But now you hold this tardy invoice in your hands, and then you realize that the value, the acquisition value that you put on the asset record was not correct. Now, what could you do in a situation like that? Well, one solution would be to go into that asset record and increase the acquisition value. So that's what you could do. However, if you were using a straight line method to depreciate it and you increase the acquisition value, then it's going to render the asset under depreciated. Let's look at an example here. Let's say that you've got an asset record. It's a $12,000 asset and you're depreciating it over a 10-year life and you're using a straight line method. So how could you calculate the rate of depreciation expense for an asset like that? Well, let's look at the formula. And the formula is, as you can see here on my slide, cost minus salvage value divided by life. So that's the formula for a straight line method. Let's plug in the numbers here. Well, we've got a $12,000 asset. I gave you no salvage value. So now we've got $12,000 in the numerator, and we divide that by the 10 years. So what will that give us then? Well, if we crunch the numbers, it's going to give us $1,200 per year or $100 per month. And you know, that's what a straight line does. It gives you that same amount for each fiscal period over the life of the asset. Let's look at an example here in the depreciation program. So let me switch back to the depreciation program. Okay, I'm now back into the depreciation program, and you'll notice here I've got at the bottom of my list of records, I've got some office furniture. Let's go into the detail view and look at this asset. And in this example, I'm going to focus on the internal book. And you'll notice that it's a $12,000 asset depreciated over a straight line method over a life of 10 years. Now, I had calculated that on my PowerPoint slide as $1,200 per year or $100 a month. And you may be thinking, oh, wait a minute, Bob, you crunched those numbers pretty quickly. How do I know you actually crunched those numbers right? Well, let me show you a tool that you might use here in the program. I'm going to go up to the depreciation pull down menu and select monthly projection. This will open up my report definition window. I'm going to remove the check from the tax book, put it on the internal book, and run this report. So this report will give us the monthly projection figures for the rest of this year. I'm going to maximize this report and zoom in a little bit so you can see a little better. And you can see that for each of the 12 months across this year, we can see a projected depreciation expense of $100 a month and $1,200 for the whole year, just exactly like what our formula produced. I'm going to go ahead and close that report, and I'm going to close the dialog window. And let's take a look at the blue depreciation calculation figures here for the internal book. So when I scroll down here, we can see the last time we depreciated the internal book was through April of this year. And we've got a current year-to-date figure of 400, a current accum of 400, and that's right. That's what we would expect at this point in time, isn't it? Because it's depreciating at a rate of 100 a month. Now let's change a critical field here. And let's simulate that we received a tardy invoice on this asset. And so now I realize the cost of this asset was not $12,000, and I'm going to keep the numbers simple here, and I'm just going to double the numerator. So instead of 12,000, I'm going to use a figure of 24,000. So I'll go into these fields and change these to 24,000. I'm going to change. I change it in the tax book. I'll change it here in the internal book. But this book has already been depreciated. And when I hit the tab key, watch what happens. I get a warning. Hey, you're changing a critical field. Are you sure you want to do this? And I'm going to say yes. And now look at the dialog window. Now I've got two dates here. And notice the default is lying on the current through date option. Now, it defaults there because the general rule in GAAP, and I can't say that we always follow this, but the general rule in GAAP is that when you make a change like what we're doing here, the change is done prospectively, not retroactively. So that's why it defaults to the current through date. I'm going to go ahead and accept that and click OK. And now when I click OK, let me scroll down to show you the beginning fields. Notice this, the beginning fields automatically get filled in. You see it captures the date I last depreciated. That was through April. It captures those figures that I'd showed you. We'd already depreciated, the 400 year to date, the 400 accum. Notice that those match the blue depreciation calculation figures down below. But you heard me mention this warning to you about if you're using a straight line method, and you increase the acquisition value, it will render the asset underdepreciated. So let me show you this. I'm going to run a quick projection on the internal book. Let me maximize this and increase the zoom so it'll be easier for you to see. So here is the projected depreciation for the remainder of its life. And I want you to draw your eyes here to the lower right corner of the matrix. And notice that we only recover the $23,600 out of our $24,000 investment in this asset. In other words, we have a shortfall of $400. And that shortfall is because the first 4 months of its life, we were depreciating at a rate of 100 a month, and we really should have been depreciating at a rate of 200 a month. You see, that's what can happen. And if you're not aware of this, then you could come out to the end of the life of this asset and it never fully depreciates. And then essentially what you're doing is you're leaving money on the table, so to speak, that is never accounted for. So let me close this. How could we fix that? Well, there are some options. And one option is we could change the method to the RV method. The RV, let me show you this on the menu of choices. RV is remaining value divided by remaining life. So because of the way that formula is constructed, it will fix this shortcoming that I just pointed out to you. So now when I make that change, I'm going to hit the tab key. And again, because I'm changing one of the critical fields, I'm again going to see this warning. Are you sure? And I'm going to say yes. And again, it opens up the dialog window. Now this time you'll notice I've got 3 dates. I've got a beginning date on this asset record now. I could make it effective then, although in this case it's the same as the current through date. I'll go ahead and click OK. Now let me run the quick projection for this asset now in the internal book, now that I have changed the method to RV. I'll open up this report, increase the zoom factor here, make it a little easier for you to see these numbers. Now that I have changed the method to RV, look in the lower right corner, and you'll notice now at the end of its life, I'll fully recover the $24,000 investment that I made in this asset. So that $400 shortfall that I had, I will now recover. And the way the program is going to give it to me is it's going to spread it out evenly over the remaining life of the asset. So that's one thing that you could do to fix that problem. I'm going to go ahead and close this and close out my dialog window. I'll go back here to the asset list view, save the changes here on that one. Let me go back to my PowerPoint. Okay, I'm showing you now my PowerPoint slide. So here's the thing I want you to be aware of. When you make a change to a critical field and you're using a straight line method, it may put the asset in a state of being underdepreciated. And that would happen depending on the type of change that you're doing. If we were to reduce the acquisition value, for example, the asset would be put into a state of being over depreciated. So it depends on the kind of change that you're making, whether or not it's under over depreciated. And this also depends on what method are you using. And in your tax books, you may be using a straight line method for some of your assets. It's been my observation, good people, that the overwhelming majority of our customers are using a straight line method when it comes to financial reporting. And so this is why I put the focus here of this example in the internal book, because this shows up a lot where you're using a straight line method, and that is typically done in the internal book. And then you heard me say that one of your options is to handle that is to change the method to RV, which is remaining value divided by remaining life. Now this brings us to polling question number 2. Look at this. When the critical field is changed on an asset already depreciated and made effective from the current through date, will it always make the asset underdepreciated? Yes or no? Will it always make the asset underdepreciated? Paul, could you launch the polling question? The polling question is now open. Let me give you a few seconds here to put in your answer, yes or no. Let me give you a few more moments here to do that. Okay, and Paul, you can close the polling question. Okay, and the answer is no. And it looks like everybody got that right. Good job. So you heard me say that depends on the change that you're making. It's possible if you're using a straight line method, the asset might be over depreciated. And also it depends on the depreciation method itself. Now, finally, we're going to talk about using the bulk edit feature. Now, this is a new feature. It was added to the program just last year. And with this feature, you can change up to 2 book information fields. You can change the depreciation method, and you can also change the estimated life with the bulk edit. Now, what makes this so powerful is that before we had the bulk edit, if you had to make changes to your book information fields, you had to go into each asset record one at a time. Well, now you can take this bulk edit and apply it to a group of assets. But first, of course, you're going to have to create that group of assets. We at Sage recommend that you create a backup file. This will give you the safety of a fallback position because, believe me when I tell you, this bulk edit is a very powerful feature, and it may bring about changes that you did not intend. And so if that happens, you really need to have a backup file just in case you need to put your company back to the way it was before you applied the bulk edit. Now let's review this in the depreciation program. So I'm going to go back to the depreciation program. Okay, so I've got the program open now. And let's say that I have got a bunch of QIP assets that I need to change to comply with this new tax law that I mentioned to you was put into effect with the CARES Act of 2020. So I need to create a group of assets that identifies all of those QIP assets. So I'm going to open up my group manager, and I'm going to create a group of assets called QIP. Click the Add button. Now, I admit there are different ways of creating a group of assets that might identify all of your QIP assets. One thing that I have done, and maybe you picked up on it, was in the description field, I put in a string of characters. In this case, I put in QIP. And you've got a lot of room to work with in the description field. Up to as many as 80 characters can be entered into the description field. And so this takes a little bit of pre-planning, but if you think about it and you include a keyword or a key code somewhere in the description field, then you have a way of identifying, you see, all of those that are somehow related. And that's what I've got here. So I'll use that to create my group. So look at the criterion down below. Description contains this string of characters, QIP. And by the way, this is not case sensitive. So I'll go ahead and click OK. And now I'll close my group manager, and I'm going to change groups to QIP. So here you can see I've got 7 assets in this group. Now some of these we've already changed. You remember we changed that bakery bakery QIP earlier. You can see over here, because I customized my asset list view, you can see the depreciation method, what we changed it to, and the estimated life. So see, some of these have already been changed because we individually performed an edit on them, but others have not yet been changed. So you can see some of these are showing MF 100. They're still reflecting a life of 39 years. So we want to change all those, you see. So what I could do is go up to the depreciation pull-down menu and select Bulk Edit. Now this will open up this 5-screen wizard that you see. You'll notice down here at the bottom of the screen, there's a Next button to advance to the next screen. However, it's grayed out. And it's grayed out because I have to tell the program that I've got a backup before it will let me proceed and perform this operation. So you heard me say earlier that we at Sage recommend that you create a backup before you do this, because this is a very powerful tool. All right, I'm going to go ahead and cancel this, and I'm going to create a backup. So one way to do it, not the only way, but one way is to go up to the File, pull down menu, and come down to Company Utilities. Navigate over and down to say Backup Company. That'll force me to close my active company. And I'm going to select this company that we're using here in this class, this webinar today, Westfield's Bakery-Webinar 1. Click Next. And it assumes I'd like to put it in my user files folder. And for the purpose of this instruction, that'll work out just fine. And so I'm going to call it Webinar 1. And you know what I like to do, and maybe you do this too, is include the date as part of the file name. That saves me the trouble of having to look at properties to see when I created that backup file. So I'm going to put here May 2020 and click Save. And now it's creating the backup file, which, by the way, is a compressed file. It doesn't take up a whole lot of space. It's kind of like a zipped file. When it finishes here, it will tell me that it finished, and then it will give me an opportunity to create another backup file if I want to. Okay, I can see the process is complete. And just as I expected, it's asking me, would you like to do another backup? And I'm going to say no. So I'm going to go back into my company, my Westfield's Bakery Webinar 1. I'm going to go to the depreciation pull down menu, come down to bulk edit. I'll put a check now confidently because I just created the backup file, so I can put that check there. And now the next button becomes active. I can click next. Now here I am on screen number 2. And you heard me say we can apply these changes to a group of assets. So I need to change the group here to the group I created called QIP. And let's say I want to change it in the tax book and let's say the AMT book. I'll just use these 2 books as an illustration here today with you. And then I will click next. Now, what do I want to change here? Well, I'm going to change the depreciation method from whatever it is. Actually, I'm using MF100. So I think I'll go ahead and select MF100. And I'm going to change these to MA100. I'm also going to change the estimated life because now under this current tax law, the life needs to be changed from 39 years to 15 years. So I'm going to put in here 39. By the way, you've got to put these numbers in the right format, which includes the months, 3900 tab, and I'll put in here 1500. Okay, so that's what we're doing. I'll click next. When am I going to make it effective? I'm going to make it effective with a placed in service date because I'm going to take the bonus. So we need to make these changes effective from when we put them in service. Click next. So here I am on screen number 5. You can see here the group of assets that are going to be changed. Here are the books that I'm changing, the tax and the AMT, effective with a placed in service date. You'll notice the execute button is grayed out, but I have a validate button. We want to validate before we execute, so I'll click validate. And it will open up my browser and give me this validation report, recapping here what's going on. These changes are being made to the QIP group. You can see that in the top left here. Here are the book information fields that are being changed. You can see the depreciation method from MF100 to MA100. And you can see the estimated life is being changed from 39 to 15 years. Over on the right, you can see the books that are being affected and effective with the placed in service date. So that's the way that validation report looks. Let's go back into my program. And now let's hit execute. It will again open up my browser and produce this execution report, which looks like the validation report we just saw a moment ago. All right, go back into the depreciation program. I'm going to close my bulk edit window. I'm going to change groups now to QIP. So now I'm looking at this group of assets, and because of the way I've customized the asset list view, you can see now the depreciation method has been changed for all these where I'm taking the bonus, and also the estimated life has been changed now to where it comports with the new tax law. Now, by the way, this is going to affect your depreciation that you had previously calculated for those years. Most of these are back in 2018, you see. So we recommend, we at Sage don't give tax advice, but we recommend that you discuss this with qualified tax counsel on deciding how you want to proceed. Do you want to file an amended tax return? Or maybe you just need to file a 3115. You need to discuss that with qualified tax counsel, because even if you don't take the bonus, watch this now. Even if you don't take the bonus, but you just change the life to 15 years, it will increase the amount of depreciation for that year that you previously calculated. So you need to be aware of that. Now let's look at one more example. and then we'll wrap things up. I'm going to create a group here called freezers. And I'll click the Add button. And here, what I want to look for are all assets where I've got the string of characters freeze somewhere in the description. Now I'll click the Add button. And so here's one of the criteria that I want. I said one of the criteria because I also want to make these changes only to active assets. So let me go here with activity code. And I'm going to change the activity code to A, which represents active assets. So here are the two criteria that I'm going to use to create this group. The description contains the string of characters freeze, and activity code is currently A. I'll click OK, and I'll close my group manager. And I'm going to change groups now to freezers. Okay. So I've got a total of 6 assets in this group. The first one is a 3-door freezer, kind of an older asset. See, the acquisition date was back in 2008. And then a bunch of walk-in freezers. They're a little newer. Most of these, it looks like, were acquired in 2013, and one was acquired in 2018, you see. If we go into the detail view and let's say look at the first one, here's this 3-door freezer. Notice in the internal book it was placed in service in 2008 at a cost of $63.57, depreciated over a straight line method with a life of 10 years. And if I scroll down to look at the blue depreciation calculation figures, I see that the current accum is $63.57. It matches the acquisition value. Book value reads 0. So this particular asset I'm looking at, the 3-door freezer, is fully depreciated. But if I use the go to arrow to advance to the next asset in this group, in this case, a walk-in freezer, asset number 304. This is one that was put in service back in 2013. Again, notice a straight line method with a 10-year life, just like what we saw in the last one. But this one is still depreciating. Let's confirm by looking at our blue depreciation calculation figures. And you can see, yes, current accum, book value, we're still depreciating it. So it's not yet fully depreciated. If I use the go to arrow to advance to the next one, asset number 305, again, you'll notice straight line method, 10-year life. Again, we're still depreciating it. So all of these other assets in this group are not yet fully depreciated. Only the first one, the 3-door freezer, was fully depreciated. Now, what we want to do is we want to change the life on these assets, these freezers, from 10 years to 7 years. Now, watch this. Think about this for a moment. If we change the life from 10 to 7, we're reducing the life. Well, that's going to have the same impact as if you increase the acquisition value. And if you decrease the life, it will render the asset underdepreciated, just like what I showed you earlier when we increased the acquisition value. So I want to make these changes using the bulk edit. So let me do this here. I'll go back to the asset list view and go up to the depreciation pull down menu and select bulk edit. So this opens up the bulk edit feature we saw a moment ago. I'm going to put a check here because I know I have a backup file. I'll click next. What is the group I want to apply these to? Freezers. And I'm going to apply these changes to the internal book. I'll click next. Now what I want to do here is change the life from 10 years to 7 years. So I'll put in here 10. And remember I said you've got to put in the months, 00, tab. And I want to change the life, reducing it to 7 years. So I'll put in 0700. Now, as we learned earlier, that will render the asset underdepreciated. So I really need to fix that. So how can I fix it? Well, like I showed you, I could change the method to RV, you see, and then that way I'll get at the end of the lives of these assets. Once I change them to RV, I'll get the full depreciation that I'm entitled to, you see. All right, I'll click next and advance to screen number 4. When do I want to make these changes effective? And I'm going to go with the current through date. See, the bullet is defaulting there to the current through date, and then I will click next. So now I'm on screen number 5, this validation screen. Here's a recap of what we're doing. We're applying these changes to the group called freezers, the internal book, making them effective with the current through date. And look, here are the changes, a recap of what I'm doing. We're changing the life from 10 to 7, and we're changing the method to RV. Again, I'm going to click validate. Again, it's going to open up my browser and show me this validation report, recapping here what I intend to do, applying these changes. Look in the header, or not really the header, but left-hand side here at the top, you can see the group of assets where we're making these changes, freezers. Here are the 2 book information fields that we're changing and how we're changing them. You can see all that is recapped there for you on the left. And on the right, a recap here of the books that we're changing. In this case, the internal book, making these changes effective with the current through date. Down below, you can see a list of the assets, and notice that one of these assets errors out, you see, and that's that 3-door freezer. Because it's already fully depreciated, the program is not going to make a change to it. It will change the others, but not this 3-door freezer. Okay, I'm going to go back to the depreciation program now and make these changes by hitting the execute button. Again, it opens up my browser and produces this report. Looks just like it did a moment ago when we were looking at the validation report. I'll close now my group manager. Now, if I go into the detail view, I'm still here in the group called freezers. If I go into the detail view and look at this first one, the 3-door freezer, notice it has not been changed. It still has a straight line method and a 10-year life, but that's the one, you remember, that errored out. It did not change because it was already fully depreciated. However, these others should have been changed. Let's check them and see. When I click on the go to arrow to advance to the next one, here I'm now looking at asset 304, and you can see that the method has been changed to RV, the life has been changed to 7 years. If I advance and go to the next one, 305, again, you'll notice the same changes, RV and 7 years. You see, all of these were changed, you see, because of the power of the bulk edit. Okay, I am going to go back to my PowerPoint. Okay, and now we have come to polling question number 3. Are you required to create a backup file in order to use the bulk edit to change critical fields on a group of assets? Are you required? So Paul, if you could launch the polling question. The polling question is now open. If you will put in your response, let me give you a few moments to answer yes or no. Is the backup file required to use the bulk edit? Take a moment to think about it. Okay, interesting. Got some distribution there on those responses. Okay, well, this is a tricky question. You can go ahead and close the poll now, Paul. Thank you. I said this is a tricky question. The answer technically is no. You don't really have to have a backup file in place. What you have to do is put a check in that box that tells the program that you do have a backup file. In other words, you could lie and still proceed to use the bulk edit. But you heard me say we recommend that you have the safety of a fallback position. So that's why I showed you how you could create a backup file, but technically it's not really required. Okay, so in this webinar today, we have looked at changing the book information fields on individual assets, and in the examples that I showed you, we made some of them effective from the placed in service date. We made some of them effective with the current through date. And so now I hope you have a better understanding of the implications from making changes like that. And then we finished up here by changing the critical fields for a group of assets using the bulk edit feature, which, as you saw, is a very powerful way of doing something like that. Okay, any questions that you might have? And if so, let's take a few minutes to address those questions. Let's see. Paul, did you get any questions?
There was one comment about the changing the estimated life that somebody noticed that not changing the life, changing the method, that sometimes that seemed to automatically change the life. You probably have to show that back in the program that the comment was made. Double check that, because apparently they did it without double checking and got it to change automatically. I believe that's only supposed to happen in some previous versions, and that at least one of the changes was recently fixed so that doesn't happen. But does it ever happen that the life automatically changes when a method is changed?
That is a great question. And yes, in the past, when you change to the RV method, it would automatically change the life to 7 years. And that has been changed in the program. However, there are still some depreciation methods. If you change it to it, the life will get changed. And that comes from the programming in the depreciation software. So here's what I would recommend. Whenever you change a depreciation method, you're going to need to look at those other values, like the estimated life, and make sure it's what you want to use. Otherwise, you may need to edit the estimated life in addition to changing the depreciation method. Great question. Any other questions?
None others so far here.
Okay. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit before, as I wrap up here, with what we do. We teach, the team of 4 of us that I introduced to you at the outset, teach instructor-led classes, and we encourage you to sign up for a class. Here are some links that take you to some Sage websites with some very valuable information. And one of these is, you'll notice down here where it says how to log into Sage U. So if you decide that you'd like to sign up for a class, an instructor-led class, or any class actually, might be an anytime learning class. I often refer to those as ATLs, but you can sign up for those classes on the Sage U website, and here is the link to that. If you just want to see what's available, here's a link to that as well. And let me point out something to you may not be aware of, but there is a promotion going on right now, a special promotion. And I have never seen this before, but offered through the end of June, you can take these ATL classes for free. Now, for our customers that have a gold support plan, they were free anyway, but now it's open for anybody. So anyone can take the ATL classes for free if you'd like to, and that is good through the end of June. Now, if you decide you'd like to take an instructor-led class, and when you're signing up for that class on the Sage U website, here is my promotion code. You may want to write this down. And then when you sign up for the class, my promotion code will give your company a 10% discount off of the cost of the tuition, and that applies on top of any other discounts that might otherwise apply. I hope that we'll see you. Maybe not me. If it's not me, maybe Paul or Ann or Julie might see you in a class coming up, but I have enjoyed being with you today. And what we're going to do is we will post a recording of this webinar. So you can go to the same website, the seminar website that you used to register for this, and you'll see a link there for on-demand webinars where you can see recordings of past webinars. And so this information will be on that recording. Also, let me pause and just ask any other questions. If you're having a question that you were thinking about, would you raise your hand? Click on the icon there to raise your hand so I can give you time to put in your question. Don't see any other. Oh, okay.
We
Paul.
do have one other comment, Bob, about the group that we have called ProServe that can change any field in bulk. Built into the program, we've shown the ability to change the place in service, date, and the estimated life. But our group called ProServe can change in bulk any other field or all fields that you're interested in changing in bulk.
Okay, thanks, Paul. I see a hand went up. Is there another question, Paul?
That comment was from Lawrence.
Well, thank you all for attending the webinar. And now, in order to leave the webinar, if you want, you can just go to the upper right corner and click on the Windows Convention X, and that will close down the webinar. But thank you for attending. Have a good day.